Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he walked along the metal fence that surrounded the mining colony. The twin suns of Kepler 442b burned hot in the alien sky, making his uniform stick to his skin. He had been doing the same patrol for 18 months now, walking the same path every day, checking the same security points, and watching for any sign of trouble. The mining colony of New Denver was not much to look at. A few dozen metal buildings scattered across the red dirt, connected by covered walkways that protected people from the harsh sunlight. 300 humans lived and worked here, all focused on one thing: digging rare metals from the ground and sending them back to Earth. Jake's job was simple: keep everyone safe, make sure no one got hurt, report anything strange to his commanders back on Earth. It was not exciting work, but it was important. The metals they mined here were worth billions of dollars, and Earth needed them to build better computers and faster spaceships. As he walked, Jake could hear the sounds of the mining operation echoing from the deep pits around the colony. Giant machines dug into the planet's surface, pulling up tons of dirt and rock every hour. The workers operated the machines from air-conditioned cabins, safe from the heat and the dangerous atmosphere outside. Jake had been a soldier for 12 years before coming to Kepler 442b. He had fought in 3 wars on Earth and earned medals for courage under fire. But those battles seemed easy compared to the daily challenge of staying alert on this quiet planet, where nothing ever happened. The planet sat near the border with Zephyrian space. The Zephyrians were an alien race that controlled dozens of star systems near human territory. They were known for their advanced technology and their strict rules about who could enter their space. Most humans had never seen a Zephyrian, and that was probably for the best. The aliens did not seem interested in making friends. Jake stopped at Checkpoint 7 and scanned his identification card. The computer beeped and recorded his location. Everything was normal. Everything was always normal on these patrols. Sometimes he wondered if the security job was really necessary, or if Earth Command just wanted to keep soldiers busy. The mining operation ran 24 hours a day, but Jake preferred the day shift. At night, the planet became even more dangerous. The temperature dropped below freezing, and strange winds carried toxic dust across the landscape. During the day, at least he could see what was coming. He was about to turn back toward the colony when something caught his eye. A thin line of smoke was rising from the canyon about 2 miles away. Jake pulled out his binoculars and focused on the source. There, hidden behind a pile of rocks, was what looked like a crashed vehicle. Jake's training kicked in immediately. Unknown vehicles meant potential threats. He activated his radio and prepared to call for backup, but then he stopped. The smoke was thin and white, not the black smoke that came from burning fuel, and the shape of the vehicle was wrong. It was too smooth, too curved to be human-made. He made a decision that would change his life forever. Instead of calling for help, Jake decided to investigate alone. If it was nothing, he would save everyone from a false alarm. If it was something dangerous, he would be the only one at risk. Jake left the patrol path and hiked toward the canyon. The rocky ground was difficult to walk on, and his boots kept slipping on the loose stones. The heat seemed to get worse as he moved away from the colony's air recycling systems. By the time he reached the crash site, his water bottle was half empty. The vehicle was definitely not human. It was made of some kind of metal that seemed to shift color in the sunlight, going from silver to blue to green as he moved around it. The shape was organic, like a seed or an egg, with no visible windows or doors. One side was cracked open, revealing a dark interior. Jake drew his sidearm and approached carefully. His military training told him to assume the worst and prepare for combat. But as he got closer, he heard something that made him freeze. It was a sound like singing, but sad and weak. Someone was alive inside the crashed vehicle. He peered through the crack in the hull and saw her. The being inside was clearly female, though obviously not human. Her skin was pale blue, almost white, and she was taller and thinner than any human woman. Her hair was long and silver, and her eyes were large and dark. She was wearing some kind of form-fitting suit that looked damaged. The alien woman was conscious but badly hurt. One of her legs was bent at a wrong angle, and blue blood was seeping from cuts on her arms and face. When she saw Jake, her eyes widened with fear. She tried to move away from him, but cried out in pain. Jake holstered his weapon and held up his hands to show he meant no harm. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'm not going to hurt you." The alien woman stared at him with those large, dark eyes. She said something in a language that sounded like music mixed with whispers. Her voice was beautiful, even though she was clearly in pain. Jake had no idea what she was saying, but he understood that she was afraid. He had seen that look before in the eyes of wounded soldiers on the battlefield. She was hurt, scared, and far from home. He looked around the crash site and saw that her vehicle was beyond repair. The hull was cracked in several places, and strange fluids were leaking from the damaged systems. Whatever had brought her here, she was not going anywhere in that ship. Jake made his second life-changing decision of the day. Instead of calling for backup and turning the alien woman over to his superiors, he decided to help her. Something about her reminded him of his younger sister back on Earth. She had that same look of vulnerability mixed with determination. "Can you walk?" Jake asked, knowing she probably could not understand him. He pointed to her injured leg and then to himself, trying to communicate that he wanted to help. The alien woman seemed to understand his gestures. She shook her head and pointed to her leg, then made a sound that might have been their word for no or broken. Jake nodded and looked around. There was an abandoned mining shelter about a mile away, left over from the early days of the colony. It would provide cover and basic supplies. He could treat her wounds there and figure out what to do next, but first he had to get her there. The alien woman was taller than him and probably weighed more than he could carry comfortably. But Jake had carried wounded soldiers before, and he was not about to leave an injured person behind. He managed to communicate his plan through gestures and simple words. The alien woman seemed to understand that he wanted to help her reach safety. Despite her fear, she allowed him to lift her carefully and begin the difficult journey to the shelter. As they moved slowly across the rocky ground, Jake wondered what he was getting himself into. He was risking his career, maybe his life, for a complete stranger from another world. But every time he looked into those large, frightened eyes, he knew he was doing the right thing. The abandoned shelter came into view. Just as the alien woman lost consciousness from pain and blood loss, Jake carried her the last 100 yards, his back aching and his uniform soaked with sweat. Whatever happened next, there was no turning back now. Jake carefully placed the alien woman on the old cot in the abandoned mining shelter. The building had been empty for 2 years, but it still had basic supplies and a working water filter. He activated the emergency power cell, and the lights flickered on, casting a dim glow over the small room. The alien woman was still unconscious, her breathing shallow and quick. Jake had basic medical training from his military service, but he had never treated anyone who was not human. He hoped that the basics would be the same. Stop the bleeding, stabilize the patient, and keep them warm. He opened his field medical kit and began cleaning her wounds. The blue blood was thicker than human blood, and it seemed to clot faster. That was good news. Her leg was definitely broken, but it was a clean break that he could splint with materials from the shelter. As he worked, Jake tried to make sense of what was happening. The alien woman's ship had been damaged in what looked like a fight. There were burn marks on the hull that could only have come from energy weapons. Someone had been shooting at her before she crashed. The alien woman woke up while Jake was bandaging a cut on her arm. She looked around the shelter with confusion, then focused on him. For a moment, Jake thought she might try to run, but then she seemed to remember that he had helped her. "Thank you," she said in broken English. Her voice was soft and musical, even when speaking human words. Jake was surprised that she could speak his language at all. "You know English?" "Little bit," she replied, holding up her hand to show a small gap between her thumb and finger. "Listen to your broadcasts. Learn some words." Jake nodded and continued working on her injuries. "What's your name?" "Lyra," she said. "Lyra Velkes, you?" "Jake Morrison." "Lieutenant Jake Morrison." He finished with the bandage and looked at her. "Leg, this is going to hurt." Lyra nodded and gripped the sides of the cot. Jake carefully straightened her broken leg and applied a splint made from metal pipes he found in the shelter. She made a soft sound of pain but did not cry out. "You are soldier," Lyra said when Jake finished. It was not a question. "Yes, I guard the mining colony. Why you help me? Your people and my people not friends?" Jake considered the question as he put away his medical supplies. "Because you needed help. That's what we do." Lyra studied his face with those large, dark eyes. "Not all humans like that. Not all Zephyrians like that, too." "Zephyrians? That's what your people are called?" "Yes, we live in star systems near here. You know this." Jake knew about the Zephyrian Empire, but he had never expected to meet one of them. "Why were you being chased? Who shot at your ship?" Lyra's expression became sad and angry at the same time. "My own people. Military council want to attack human colonies. I say no. I have proof they plan war without permission from High Council." "So you stole the proof?" "I take evidence to stop war. But they find out, send hunters after me." Lyra tried to sit up, but Jake gently pushed her back down. "Rest. You lost a lot of blood." "No time for rest. Hunters still coming. They track my ship here." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "How many hunters? 5? Maybe 6? All trained killers with best weapons and armor." "When will they get here?" "Soon, maybe one day, maybe 2. Depends how careful they are." Jake stood up and walked to the small window. The mining colony was visible in the distance, a cluster of metal buildings shining in the alien sunlight. If the hunters came here, they would find Lyra easily. But if he moved her, she might not survive the journey in her condition. "We need to get you back to the colony," Jake said. "My people can protect you," Lyra shook her head. "Hunters will kill everyone to get to me." "Your weapon's not good enough against Zephyrian armor." "Then what do you suggest? You leave me here, go back to your people, tell them to prepare for attack or leave planet." Jake turned away from the window and looked at her. "I'm not leaving you." "Why not?" "You do your part. You help injured person, now save yourself." "It doesn't work that way. I not understand." Jake sat down on the chair next to the cot. "Where I come from, we have a saying, you don't leave anyone behind, ever." Lyra was quiet for a long moment. "Even alien person?" "Even alien person?" She closed her eyes and seemed to be thinking. "Hunters. Very dangerous. They kill many people in war. They have no mercy. Then we'll have to be smarter than they are." "How?" Jake looked around the shelter, taking inventory of what they had. His rifle, his sidearm, a few grenades, and whatever supplies were left in the abandoned building. Not much against trained alien warriors with advanced weapons. "Tell me about their armor. Can normal bullets hurt them?" "Maybe, if you hit right spot, but their shields stop most weapons." "Shields?" "Energy field around body, like second skin made of light." Jake had heard about energy shields in the intelligence reports about Zephyrian technology. Human scientists had been trying to develop similar technology for years without success. "What about explosives?" "Shields not perfect. Big explosion might work." Jake nodded. The mining operation used explosives to break up rock formations. If he could get to the colony and back without being seen, he might be able to get some heavy charges. "I need to make a trip," he told Lyra. "Get some better weapons. Too dangerous. Hunters might see you." "It's a risk I have to take." Lyra grabbed his arm as he stood up. "Jake Morrison, why you do this? Why you risk everything for stranger?" Jake looked down at her hand on his arm. Her skin was warm despite its blue color, and her grip was surprisingly strong. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply. "Your people all like this?" "Some are. The best of us try to be." Lyra released his arm and lay back on the cot. "If you get killed, I die too." "Then I won't get killed." Jake checked his equipment and prepared to leave. The trip to the colony would take 2 hours if he moved carefully. He would have to stay off the main paths and avoid the security cameras. "Jake?" Lyra called as he reached the door. "Yes?" "Thank you for everything. Thank me when we're both safe." Jake stepped out into the harsh sunlight and began his dangerous journey back to the colony. Behind him, Lyra closed her eyes and tried to rest. She knew that the hunters would arrive soon, and when they did, both she and Jake would need all their strength to survive. As Jake disappeared into the rocky landscape, Lyra wondered if she had made a terrible mistake by telling him about the approaching danger. He was just one human with basic weapons against 5 trained Zephian warriors. The odds were hopeless, but something about Jake Morrison gave her hope. He had risked everything to help a stranger, and he refused to abandon her even when it would have been the smart thing to do. Maybe, just maybe, that kind of courage would be enough to save them both. The hunt was about to begin. Jake moved through the rocky landscape like a ghost, using every skill he had learned in 12 years of military service. The trip back to the mining colony took 3 hours instead of 2 because he had to avoid the main paths and security cameras. He could not risk anyone seeing him and asking questions about why he was off his patrol route. The colony was busy with the evening shift change. Workers were moving between buildings and the mining equipment was being serviced for the night operations. Jake waited until the activity died down before making his move toward the explosive storage facility. The building was heavily secured, but Jake knew the security codes. As head of colony security, he had access to all the restricted areas. He quickly gathered what he needed: 4 high explosive charges, extra ammunition for his rifle, and a small device that could detect movement from a long distance. As he prepared to leave, Jake heard footsteps outside the building. He quickly hid behind a stack of supply crates as someone entered the facility. It was Danny Walsh, the night security supervisor. "Jake, what are you doing here?" Danny asked, shining his flashlight around the room. Jake stepped out from behind the crates. Danny was a good man and a friend, but Jake could not tell him the truth about what was happening. "Just checking the inventory," Jake said. Some of the day shift reports didn't match the computer records. Danny looked at the explosives and ammunition that Jake had gathered. "Planning to blow something up? Just being prepared? You know how it is," Danny nodded, but Jake could see the suspicion in his eyes. "Want some help with whatever you're doing?" "Thanks, but I can handle it. Just routine stuff." Jake packed his supplies and left the building. Knowing that Danny would probably report the incident to the colony administrator, he had maybe 6 hours before someone came looking for him. That would have to be enough. The return trip to the shelter took even longer because Jake was carrying heavy equipment. By the time he reached the abandoned building, the twin suns were setting and the temperature was starting to drop. He found Lyra awake and alert, looking much better than when he had left her. "You came back," she said, and Jake could hear the relief in her voice. "I told you I would. I think maybe you change mind, decide to save yourself." Jake set down his equipment and checked her injuries. The bandages were holding, and her legs seemed to be healing faster than a human bone would. "How do you feel?" "Better. Strong enough to fight if needed." "Good, because we're going to need all the help we can get." Jake showed her the explosives and explained his plan. They would set up the charges around the shelter and wait for the hunters to arrive. When the aliens got close enough, Jake would detonate the explosives and hopefully take out some of them before the real fight began. "Dangerous plan," Lyra said. "Hunters very smart. They might see trap. Do you have a better idea?" "Run. Try to reach your colony. You said yourself that I can't carry you that far. And even if we made it, the hunters would follow us there." Lyra was quiet for a moment. "You right? We fight here?" Jake spent the next hour setting up the explosive charges while Lyra watched from the window. Her enhanced hearing could detect sounds that human ears missed, and she would be their early warning system when the hunters arrived. "Jake," Lyra said as he finished with the last charge, "I need tell you something about hunters." "What?" "Their leader is Kexvo Arden. He very dangerous warrior. Kill many enemies in battle. What makes him so special? He not just soldier, he hunter of people. Track down criminals and traitors for government. Never fail to catch target." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "How many people has he killed?" "Many, maybe 100. Maybe more. And now he's coming for you." "Yes, but also for you now. You help me, so you enemy too." Jake checked his rifle and made sure it was loaded. Then we'll just have to make sure he doesn't leave this planet. Jake, you need to understand something. I'm not just refugee. I am daughter of High Counselor. My family very important in Zephyrian government. Jake stared at her. Your royalty? Something like that. My father lead peace faction in government. That why I try to stop war, but also why hunters want me dead. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because it not change anything. I still person who need help. You still person who give help. Jake nodded. She was right. It did not matter who she was or where she came from. What mattered was that she was in danger and he had chosen to protect her. They did not have to wait long. Just after midnight, Lyra's sensitive hearing picked up the sound of approaching vehicles. Jake looked through his binoculars and saw 5 dark shapes moving across the landscape. The hunters had found them. They stop about 1 mile away, Lyra whispered. They come rest of way on foot. Jake activated his movement detector and placed it near the window. The device would beep softly when it detected anything larger than a small animal approaching the shelter. How long do we have? Maybe 30 minutes. They moved slow and careful. Jake made his final preparations. He positioned himself at the window with the best view of the approaching route. Lyra, despite her injured leg, took position at the other window with Jake's sidearm. You know how to use that? Jake asked. Zephyrian weapon's different, but I figure out human gun. The movement detector began beeping softly. Jake could see shapes moving between the rocks outside. The hunters were closer than he had expected. There, Lyra whispered, pointing to a ridge about 200 yards away. I see one. Jake looked through his rifle scope and spotted the hunter. The alien warrior was wearing dark armor that seemed to bend light around it, making him hard to see. The technology was far beyond anything humans had developed. I count 5, Jake said, tracking the movements through his scope. They're spreading out to surround us. Standard hunter tactic. Cut off all escape routes. The lead hunter, who had to be HFY Ardan, approached within 50 yards of the shelter. Jake could see him clearly now through the scope. He was larger than the other hunters, with ceremonial markings on his armor that glowed with soft light. Kex. VOR Dan stopped and called out in perfect English. Human soldier, we know you are in there. We have no quarrel with you. Give us the traitor and you will be allowed to live. Jake did not answer. He was waiting for the hunters to move closer to the explosive charges. You have 10 seconds to respond, HFY Ardan continued. After that, we will assume you are hostile and act accordingly. Jake counted down the seconds in his head. When he reached 0, he saw the hunters begin to move forward. They were being careful, but they were also confident in their superior technology and training. Come on, Jake whispered to himself. Just a little closer. The hunters reached the perimeter where Jake had placed the explosive charges. He could see all 5 of them now, moving in formation toward the shelter. Jake's finger hovered over the detonator button. Now, Lyra whispered. Jake pressed the button. The world exploded in light and sound as 4 high explosive charges detonated simultaneously. The blast shook the shelter and shattered the windows. Jake felt the shockwave hit him like a physical blow. When the smoke cleared, Jake could see. The 2 of the hunters were down. The other 3, including HFY Ardan, were still moving but looked hurt. The explosion had damaged their armor and disrupted their energy shields. Phase 1 complete, Jake said, raising his rifle. Now comes the hard part. The 3 remaining hunters recovered quickly from the explosion. Jake watched through his damaged scope as they regrouped and took cover behind the rocks. Their armor was smoking and cracked, but they were still dangerous. KEXVO Ardan's voice boomed across the battlefield. Clever, human, you fight like warrior. But now you only delay inevitable. Jake aimed his rifle at the largest hunter and fired. The bullet struck HFY Ardan's chest armor but bounced off without causing damage. The energy shield around the hunter flickered but held. Jake, aim for joints and armor, Lyra called from her position at the other window. Neck, arms, legs, shield weaker there. Jake adjusted his aim and fired again. This time the bullet found its mark, striking the hunter in the shoulder joint. Blue blood sprayed from the wound, and the hunter stumbled backward. The other two hunters returned fire with their energy weapons. Bright beams of light punched through the shelter walls, filling the air with smoke and sparks. Jake rolled away from the window as a blast melted the metal frame where his head had been seconds before. "They trying to flush us out," Lyra said, firing Jake's sidearm at one of the hunters. "Force us to run into open?" Jake crawled to a new position and looked for another shot. The hunters were advancing slowly, using their superior firepower to destroy the shelter piece by piece. The old building would not protect them much longer. "We need to move," Jake said. "Find better cover. Where? They surround us," Jake thought. Quickly, there was a deep mining pit about 50 yards behind the shelter. If they could reach it, the steep walls would provide protection from the hunters' energy weapons. But getting there would mean crossing open ground while under fire. "The old mine shaft," Jake said. "Can you run on that leg?" Lyra tested her weight on the injured limb. "I try, but you go first. I slow you down. We go together or not at all." Another energy blast tore through the shelter wall, barely missing Jake's head. The hunters were getting closer, and their aim was improving. "On three," Jake said. 1, 2, 3. They burst out of the back of the shelter and ran toward the mine shaft. Jake fired his rifle as he moved, trying to keep the hunters pinned. Down, Lyra limped beside him, her face tight with pain but her determination clear. The hunters spotted them immediately. Energy beams lit up the air around the fleeing pair. Jake felt one blast pass so close to his ear that it singed his hair. Another beam hit the ground at his feet, melting the rock into glass. They reached the edge of the mine shaft and leaped down into the pit. The drop was about 10 feet, and Jake landed hard on his shoulder. Lyra rolled as she hit the ground, protecting her injured leg. They were both alive, but barely. "Good cover here," Lyra said, pressing her back against the rocky wall. "But also trap. Only one way out." Jake reloaded his rifle and checked his ammunition. He had 2 full magazines left, plus whatever rounds remained in his sidearm. Not much. Against 3 alien warriors with advanced weapons, the hunters appeared at the edge of the pit, looking down at their trapped prey. HFY Dan was bleeding from his shoulder wound, but he seemed more angry than hurt. "You cannot run forever, human," the hunter leader called down. "Surrender now, and I will make your death quick." "What about her?" Jake shouted back, nodding. "Toward Lyra, the traitor dies slowly. That is law." Jake and Lyra exchanged looks. There would be no negotiation, no mercy. This would end only when one side was dead. "Jake," Lyra said quietly, "I need tell you something. My people have saying, better to die fighting than live as coward. My people have the same saying." "Good, then we understand each other." The hunters began descending into the pit, moving carefully down the steep walls. Jake waited until the first hunter was halfway down before opening fire. His shots forced the alien warrior to take cover, but also revealed Jake's position. Energy beams poured down into the pit, striking the walls and floor around Jake and Lyra, the air filled with smoke and the smell of melted rock. Jake rolled behind a large boulder and continued firing upward. One of the hunters reached the bottom of the pit and advanced on Jake's position. The alien warrior was skilled, using his energy shield to deflect Jake's shots while closing the distance. Jake's rifle clicked empty just as the hunter rounded the boulder. The alien warrior raised his weapon, but Jake was faster. He lunged forward with his combat knife, driving the blade between the plates of the hunter's armor. The alien screamed and fell backward, blue blood pooling beneath him. "Two down," Jake said, grabbing the fallen hunter's energy weapon. The device was heavier than his rifle and covered with alien symbols, but the trigger was obvious enough. The remaining 2 hunters reached the bottom of the pit and spread out to attack from different directions. Jake and Lyra found themselves caught between them, with limited cover and nowhere to run. "Jake Morrison," HFY Dan called out, "you fight well for human, but this end now." The hunter leader stepped into the open, his energy weapon charged and ready. Jake could see that his shoulder wound was serious, but the alien warrior showed no signs of weakness. "You bleed for one not of your species," HFY Dan continued. "You face certain death for stranger." "Why?" Jake stood up slowly, the captured energy weapon in his hands. Because it's the right thing to do. Right thing? The hunter leader seemed genuinely puzzled. She is traitor to her own people. She steal government secrets. She deserved death. She was trying to prevent a war, trying to save lives on both sides. War is nature of universe. Strong survive, weak die. This is law. Jake looked at Lyra, who was preparing to make her own last stand despite her injuries. Then he looked back at Kexville Arden. Maybe that's your law, Jake said. But it's not mine. The final battle began with the exchange of energy blasts that lit up the pit like lightning. Jake rolled behind cover as beams of light melted the rock around him. He fired back with the alien weapon. Surprised by its power and accuracy, the second hunter tried to flank Jake's position, but Lyra was waiting. Despite her broken leg, she managed to trip the alien warrior and grab his weapon. The hunter recovered. Quickly, but not quickly enough. Lyra's shot took him in the chest, and he fell without a sound. That left only HFY Arden, the most dangerous of them all. The hunter leader was wounded, but still deadly, his years of training and experience making him a formidable opponent even at a disadvantage? Impressive, HFY Arden said, stepping over the body of his fallen comrade. But now you face me alone. Jake's captured weapon was running low on energy, the alien symbols flashing warning lights. He had maybe 5 shots left before it died. Completely, Jake, Lyra called out. His armor damaged on left side, where explosion hit. Jake nodded and began moving to get a better angle on the hunter's weak spot. But HFY Arden was ready for him. The alien warrior's next shot caught Jake in the chest, punching through his body armor and sending him sprawling. Jake felt the energy beam burn through his ribs and knew he was badly hurt. Blood was spreading across his uniform and his vision was starting to blur. But he was still alive, still fighting. Now you die, human warrior, HFY Arden said. Raising his weapon for the killing shot, Jake used his last strength to roll behind cover and fire his remaining shots at the hunter's damaged armor. The energy beam struck home, and HFY Arden staggered backward with a cry of pain, but it was not enough. The hunter leader was still standing, still dangerous, and Jake had no shots left. Jake lay behind the boulder, blood spreading across his chest. The energy beam had torn through his ribs, and every breath sent sharp pain through his body. His captured alien weapon was dead, its energy completely drained. He could hear HFY Arden approaching slowly, savoring his victory. Human warrior, the hunter leader called out. You fought with honor, but honor does not stop death. Jake looked across the pit to where Lyra was hiding. She was injured and had no way to escape. When HFY Arden finished with him, she would be next. The thought gave Jake strength he did not know he had left. He reached for his sidearm with his good hand. The weapon felt heavy, but it was loaded and ready. Jake had 5 bullets left. 5 chances to save Lyra's life. HFY Arden appeared around the boulder, his energy weapon pointed at Jake's head. The hunter leader was bleeding from multiple wounds, but his aim was steady. You die now, HFY Arden said. But first watch traitor die. The hunter leader turned his weapon toward Lyra's hiding place. Jake saw his chance and took it. With his last burst of strength, he lunged forward and grabbed HFY Arden's leg, pulling the alien warrior off balance. The hunter's shot went wide, melting rock instead of flesh. HFY Arden stumbled and fell, dropping his weapon. Jake tried to reach for it, but the hunter was faster. They fought hand-to-hand, rolling across the rocky ground. Despite his wounds, HFY Arden was stronger than Jake. The alien warrior's hands closed around Jake's throat, cutting off his air. Jake felt darkness closing in around his vision, but Jake still had his sidearm. With his last conscious thought, he pressed the barrel against HFY Arden's damaged armor and pulled the trigger. The bullet punched through the weakened metal and found its mark. HFY Arden gasped and rolled away, clutching his chest. Blue blood poured between his fingers as he struggled to breathe. The mighty hunter leader was finally beaten. Jake tried to stand but collapsed back to the ground. The fight had taken everything he had left. Blood was flowing freely from his chest wound, and his vision was getting darker. "Jake," Lyra called out, limping toward him as fast as her injured leg would. "Stay back," Jake whispered. "He might not be dead." But HFY was finished. The hunter leader looked at Jake with something that might have been respect in his dying eyes. "You fight like true warrior," HFY said, his voice weak. "I understand now why she trusts you." The alien warrior's eyes closed, and he breathed. His last breath. The hunt was over. Lyra reached Jake's side and knelt beside him. Her hands pressed against his chest wound, trying to stop the bleeding. But they both knew it was too late. Jake had lost too much blood. "Why you do this?" Lyra asked, tears streaming down her blue face. "Why you die for stranger?" Jake smiled weakly. "Not stranger anymore, friend. Jake, please, hold on, help coming." Jake could hear the sound of aircraft in the distance. Someone from the mining colony must have seen the explosions and energy blasts, but he knew they would arrive too late to save him. "Listen to me," Jake said, gripping Lyra's hand. "When they get here, tell them what happened. Tell them about the war your people were planning. Tell them you can stop it. I will, I promise. And tell my people that not all aliens are enemies. Some are worth fighting for." The aircraft sounds were getting closer. Jake could see lights in the sky above the pit. Rescue was coming, but not for him. "Lyra," Jake whispered, "your evidence. The proof about the war. Where is it?" "In my ship, hidden in memory core." "Good, use it. Stop the fighting." Jake's vision was fading, but he could see Lyra's face clearly. She was crying for him, this alien woman he had known for only 3 days. Somehow, that made everything worthwhile. "Thank you," Lyra said, "for everything." Jake closed his eyes and felt peace wash over him. He had done the right thing. He had protected someone who needed protection. Nothing else mattered, the rescue. Team from the mining colony found them an hour later. Jake Morrison was dead, but Lyra Velkes was alive. She told them everything. Just as she had promised, the mining colony sent an emergency message to Earth Command, reporting the death of Lieutenant Morrison and the presence of an alien refugee with important information. Within days, the story had reached the highest levels of human government. Lyra's evidence proved that a faction of the Zephyrian military had been planning attacks on human colonies without approval from their own government. The information caused a political crisis in the Zephyrian Empire that led to the removal of the war faction from power. But more than that, Jake's sacrifice had impressed the Zephyrian leadership. The story of a human soldier who died protecting an alien stranger spread throughout their empire. It challenged everything they thought they knew about humanity. High Counselor Vex Mordan, Lyra's father and leader of the Peace faction, sent a personal message to Earth. He requested permission to attend Jake Morrison's funeral and to meet with human leaders about establishing formal relations between their species. The funeral was held at the mining colony, with full military honors. Jake's body was wrapped in both the human flag and a Zephyrian banner of peace. Representatives from both species stood together as they honored a man who had bridged the gap between worlds. Lyra spoke at the ceremony, her English much improved after weeks of study. She told the assembled crowd about Jake's courage and sacrifice. She explained how one human's compassion had prevented a war and opened the door to friendship between species. "Jake Morrison could have followed orders," Lyra said. "He could have reported me to his superiors and saved himself. But he chose to help instead. He chose to protect someone different from himself. That choice changed everything." After the funeral, negotiations began between human and Zephyrian representatives. The aliens offered to share medical technology that could heal diseases and extend human lifespans. They offered energy sources that could power human civilization for thousands of years. They offered knowledge that could help humanity reach the stars. In return, they asked for something simple. They wanted to learn about human courage and compassion. They wanted to understand how a species could produce individuals like Jake Morrison. Lyra became the first Zephyrian ambassador to Earth. She dedicated her life to building bridges between the two species, always carrying a photo of the human soldier who had saved her life. Years later, when the first joint human-Zephyrian colony was established, it was named Morrison Station in honor of the man who had made it all possible. A statue stood in the central square, showing a human soldier protecting an alien woman. The inscription read simply, "He bled to protect a stranger and changed the galaxy forever." Jake Morrison had been buried on an alien world, far from his home and family. But his sacrifice had given both species something greater than they could have achieved alone. It had given them hope for a future where different peoples could work together, protect each other, and reach for the stars as friends. The reward had indeed been beyond belief, even though Jake never lived to see it. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from what we gain, but from what we give, and sometimes doing the right thing is reward enough.